My wife and I feel like we've always lived crime-free. Not that we do crime, but crime doesn't really seem to happen around us so much. But I don't know. We go through life minding our own business, and even though we do live in a city, which cities tend to be pretty violent. But I don't know. I feel like these days every place is violent. Sometimes the country more so than the city. I don't know. I just think if you go looking for violence maybe finds you, or if you do certain things, make certain decisions, it comes back on you, I suppose. But I've just never really felt the inclination to violence, and maybe that's for that reason. You know, like if somebody gets me angry, I don't like go in the movies and just get into bar fights with them or anything like that. I stew about it for a couple of days and then I move on with my life. So it's always very weird when nonviolent people encounter, I suppose, not necessarily violent acts, but just crime in general. I guess there's a lot of movies that are kind of dedicated to this, right? A few weeks ago, I was talking about the movie Straw Dogs with Dustin Hoffman. You know, there's something about just people going to the movies and seeing non-violent characters who I guess they can relate to suddenly get pushed to the brink where they have no choice but to do violence, right? I guess there's a lot of catharsis in that. I don't know, but I've just been thinking about this week because even though my wife and I have always lived a crime-free lifestyle and we haven't really noticed a lot of crime or violence happening around us in the neighborhood where we live, this year we have experienced we have been the victim of 2 crimes. It was only one crime until Tuesday morning. We were the victim of another one. The first crime that we were the victim of was back in February. I had COVID for a week, and I was laid up in my house. And the day that I came out, I was ready to go to work, and I was about to get on my motorcycle, and I came outside, and my motorcycle was gone. Right, somebody had stolen the motorcycle that I had bought and really enjoyed quite a bit to get back and forth to school on, to go and teach and all that. Somebody had stolen my motorcycle, and I called the police, and the police came, and I filed a report with them and asked them, what are the chances? I suppose that a lot of motorcycles get stolen. This thing's probably off in some chop shop in Georgia right now, right? And he's like, oh, no, we catch these things all the time. It's like, all right. So I never heard from him again or anybody else. It's like, yeah, the motorcycle was gone. There's no doubt about that. And ended up filing a report, obviously, with my insurance. And somehow I made out of that with a profit. I don't know how that happened. But insurance wrote me a check for the remainder of the lien, and I paid off the motorcycle with that check, and I still had something like $578 left. Right? I don't know how that happened, but I ended up just pocketing it and just putting it toward other debt that I had. So, I totally understand. I said it on a show a while back. I understand now why people commit insurance fraud. I didn't do it. Okay. I did not steal the motorcycle just so I could make the claim, but I understand the incentive for somebody who would do that kind of terrible thing. But yeah, this Tuesday we became the victim of another crime. My wife and I, once we came outside in the morning, and we were about to go our separate ways. I was about to get in my car and go to my job, and my wife was about to get her car to go to hers. And she noticed that she had forgotten to lock the car the night before. And when she opened the car door, there was just stuff strewn all about. The glove compartment was open. It was just a mess in there. So And she went through it, and yeah, sure enough, fortunately, nothing really valuable was stolen. There were things that had sentimental value, of course. As you know, a lot of stuff. One of the reasons why people don't clean out their car very, very often is that sentimental value, right? Like, oh man, that McDonald's bag has sentimental value, right? I don't know, but my wife is generally very clean, but she did have a glove compartment that was full of some sentimental stuff. She had a few years ago. Her cat, who has now passed away, Dobby, had to go to the vet and have a tooth extracted that was like decaying. So they had given my wife this tooth, and she put it in this pill bottle. And whatever. I mean, you say what you will. It had sentimental value to my wife because it was kind of a comical, but also very tragic situation to just like take your cat in. And when Dobby came home, he was all snaggle-toothed and everything. But it was one of those things that Jessica had to remember Dobby by. And so I assumed that the people who broke into her car, well, I shouldn't say break into her car because the door was unfortunately unlocked. And I wouldn't ask you to reserve judgment on Jessica, right? Because, I mean, we've all done that before, left our cars unlocked. Just happens, right? You have a lot of stuff on your plate and you just forget to do it, right? And, so they had stolen that. I guess they were probably junkies. I don't know, people who just see a pill bottle and it's like gold. And they're in a hurry, so they don't even check to see that it doesn't have any pills in it. They just take it anyway. My wife also had a big manila envelope that was full of greeting cards, right? Like birthday cards and Valentine's Day cards and things like that. And I guess they took this because they assumed that, some of them may have still had money in them or whatever, but none of them did, of course. And the last thing that they took was my wife had one of those zip-up pouches that was full of keys. And my wife does dog sit, and she works for a dog sitting agency. And fortunately, a lot of the keys in there are now defunct, that clients that she no longer goes to. But and my wife normally brings that pouch in, and I know what you're saying, like, oh my gosh, that's terrifying. But none of the keys had any names on them except maybe some pet names, right? So the thieves saw, right, like Boingo or whatever, or the Rex or whatever on the lanyard that was on the key. It didn't have any addresses on it or anything like that. None of the keys did. So it was just a bunch of blank keys that they stole for some reason. And again, I guess maybe they were in a hurry or they were drugged out or something like that. They just took this big pouch that was jingling, and maybe they thought there were like coins in there or something, like gold coins. I don't know. But yeah, they ran off with it. And yeah, it's just been a very strange year that we haven't really experienced any crime in our neighborhood in the 13, 14 years that we've been living together there. But I remember years ago, like around 2011 or so, there was a string of car break-ins. People would just shatter the windows and reach in and just like steal, coins and I guess whatever valuable objects were in there. And that happened on our street for a very brief time. It never affected me and Jessica, so maybe we're just kind of getting our comeuppance now, or the universe is just measuring things out. I don't know. I found out around 2012 when I was working for a park that there would be thieves that would come in while people were bicycling or zip lining or whatever they were doing in the park, and they would come along and just break into people's cars and steal things. And a couple of them got busted after they came to our park because the security guards noticed them and took down the license plates. And it turned out that they were like a ring. Just there are people who travel from state to state, and I guess there's enough money, I don't know, in stealing like change from people's glove compartments or whatever to warrant just traveling from state to state and breaking in people's cars and all that. It's just crime, right? It's so irritating. Why does it exist, right? It's just this sick feeling like they stole my motorcycle, so it's not like I feel that violated, because every time I would get on the motorcycle, I now feel like, oh, somebody else that wasn't me. It wasn't like that because they took it. There's nothing for it. But Jessica feels rightly just uncomfortable this week now that she's getting in her car, and she's like, oh, 2 people just were in this car, or 1 person. She doesn't know how many. But she said somebody who's not me and is not you and who I don't know was in my car just going through things. And yeah, that just feels naturally just icky, right? Just feels gross. And yeah, crime is just one of those very annoying facts of life, right? Like, I can deal with a lot of stuff. Like when they put you on this earth, you spend kind of a long time in the beginning being told about just uncomfortable truths, right? Like, hey, listen, just letting you know, no matter what you do, your body is going to want to do something else, right? That's just what happens. And there's also this thing where it's like you can buy something and you feel like it's yours, but somebody can just come and take it from you. Like, well, why would they do that? I don't know, because they can. It just is what they do. Well, can I do that? It's like, no, it's against this thing called the law. The law doesn't allow it. Well, then why do they do that? And they don't care about the law. Well, why? Right? And it's just this thing. And well, what if I catch them doing it? Well, you can call the cops, and maybe the cops will put them in prison. Well, what's prison? Well, it's this place where they put all the criminals together. Okay. So that deters them, right? They don't want to do crime anymore. Actually, they learn how to do crime better when they're in prison. You know, it's just, there's all these things you learn that are really inconvenient, and I don't like it. I don't like it. Okay, anyway, let's go ahead and start this grill up. This is the Midnight Citizen Show. This is Mike Booty. I'm on the back porch over at my folks' house, over at my parents' house, over here in the woods of Alabama. I'm going to start up the grill. There you go. And I got a steak marinating, and yeah, this is as I've said on recent podcasts, this is just a summer of no vacations for Jessica and me, and you know, not asking you to feel sorry for us or anything like that. We've gotten to take some great vacations. It's just, you know, every once in a while we just land on a summer where we can't really just go out of town. And, you know, Jessica's working and I'm working. And so what I've decided to do is just try to take like little mini vacations, right? Just have opportunities, just kind of enjoy the summer without having to get in the car and travel somewhere and see something new or whatever. So what I decided to do tonight, I'm basically the only, I guess, other than my wife who's in the family by marriage, I'm the only booty in Birmingham, right? My sister and brother-in-law and their kids are in France, and as a matter of fact, they just got back home tonight. So I guess maybe they're home now, but yeah, they all week long though they've been in France, and my parents are in Alaska. They're like went to Alaska with their church to I don't know what you do in Alaska, but they're over there. And so yeah, I'm here at their house. I'm kind of house sitting. I came over earlier today to like water some plants and scoop the litter boxes, and also let the cats out and just let them kind of go about because they've been inside most of the week. And I just decided to make a little mini vacation of tonight and just come over here and just kind of treat myself. I went to Publix and I got a steak. I'm marinating that steak, and now I'm starting at the grill. And so yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I had on this movie. I wonder if it's still on. Yeah, here it is right here. Talk about a movie that gets you thinking about crime, right? See if you know what this movie is. You know, from that music. Yeah, we're watching RoboCop. Just had on RoboCop because after being a victim of a crime, you know, you want to watch a movie that just, I don't know, RoboCop is one of those movies that it's like a sci-fi action movie that is really, really scary. This movie just, I think I just have memories of it as being a kid and watching it and just being truly mortified by not Ed 209. Ed 209 is kind of fun. He's like, looks like a kind of a microphone for a head, and he's kind of funny the way he can't like walk up or down stairs. Who scares me in this movie half to death is Clarence Boddicker, played by Kurtwood Smith, right? Yeah. Kurtwood Smith, who usually is just a character actor who it kind of comes into movies and he doesn't, he's not really ever good or bad. He's just a presence. And in this movie, you know, he was the dad in like that 70s show and all that. And he just, I don't know, he's just not really a character of good or bad note in any other movies, but in RoboCop, I don't know, I think it's the glasses. He's just the scariest crime boss ever. You know, this guy who just takes pleasure in torturing and tormenting Murphy, the cop, before he just finally shoots him in the head. Yeah, I have to rewind a little bit. I'm going to go to this scene because, yeah. Now, this is the funny, and I'll tell you in a minute, like, when I was a kid, I saw RoboCop probably way too young. I think, like, I was probably about 10 years too young to see RoboCop. But my mom rented it for me anyway. And, yeah, here's Clarence Boddicker talking to... like, if you're not familiar with RoboCop, it's a 1988 film directed by, I think, Paul Verhoeven, where Alex Murphy is this do-gooder Boy Scout cop who's on the streets patrolling a very violent city, very violent Detroit, right? And he follows this crime boss and his crew to their hangout after a botched robbery. So the criminals are really, really pissed off. And they're primarily pissed off at the cops for thwarting them. So naturally they see a cop, Alex Murphy, they catch him, and what do they want to do to him? They want to get revenge, right? For the cops thwarting their robbery. So yeah, this is that scene right here. It's just, yeah, Clarence Boddicker, played by Kurtwood Smith.
I bet that really pisses you off. You probably don't think I'm a very nice guy, do you?
Buddy, I think you're slime.
See, I got this problem. The cops don't like me, so I don't like cops.
Oh, God. And yeah, he shoots his hand off, and that's the first shot of many that come in this scene. And yeah, Clarence Boddicker, I think, like I said, I think it's the glasses, I think it's the receding hairline. You know, he just looks like a nerd. He looks like a 7th grade science teacher, but he's just doing these terrible things and torturing and tormenting. He's just a sadist, and he's got this group of just giggling thugs who are encouraging him. One of them, by the way, is Ray Wise, you know, a couple of years before he played Leland Palmer on Twin Peaks, right? But yeah, I was way too young to see this movie. And so I think even when I watch it today, more than any other movie, this movie just makes me really horrified, because the violence is cartoonish, it's over the top, but it's also the way that the actors are playing it off. It just comes across in just a nightmarish way where you're like, you can really believe that people are like this and would do something like this. And yeah, I think just paired with the idea that the movie is taking place in a near future, but it's not like there are flying cars or anything like that. It's not like it's kind of this over the top future like we see in movies like, Back to the Future Part 2 or anything like that. It's just a future that looks like the one that we all live in. Right, like all the cars are gas powered, and they're just driving on pavement, and just the city is just nightmarish. It just is like overrun, infested with crime, and when we watch the movie today, it's very much like something we can believe. It just looks like the cities that we live in, right? But what's funny is the reason that I saw this when I was a little kid, even though my parents were incredibly protective of some of the stuff that I watched. Of course, I still tried to watch as much violent stuff as I could because, right, it was, we had HBO and it was, my parents went to bed early, but, is that this clerk at the video store, told my mom that it was rated PG-13. I think maybe he genuinely thought it was not an R-rated movie. And of course, as we now know, RoboCop, in its least violent form, is the R-rated version that came out in theaters and later on videotape. But of course, it is an ultra-violent movie that the most popular cut is the unrated cut. And yeah, I just remember this video clerk, I was probably 9 years old, I suppose, and the video clerk was summoned by my mom, and she said, like, what is this movie RoboCop? My son likes this. He always talks about wanting to see it. What is it rated? And he's like, oh, it's PG-13. And she's like, oh, I don't know, that sounds awfully violent. And he's like, oh, I mean, it's got some scary, violence in it, but it's always funny though. And she's like, oh, what do you mean? And he says, well, there's a moment where this guy gets, shot and somebody yells for an ambulance instead of, even though the guy's obviously, dead. And she's like, oh, I don't know about that. And I probably just bothered my mom enough to where she finally gave in. But the scene that the video clerk was referring to was, of course, the scene with Kenny in the boardroom, right? It's this scene right here.
In this case, law enforcement have suffered.
Where they're introducing
I think it's time we gave
the boardroom to Ed 209. Yeah, so the movie, again, if you're not familiar, is all about how the police are just surrendering to crime. They just are outgunned, they're outnumbered. And this major corporation called OCP, because they want to build like this new corporate-run city in Detroit. And so in order to build the new city, they have to stop crime in the old city. So OCP takes over the police department. It's like a corporate-run police department. And they get this guy, Dick, played by Ronnie Cox. He's the I guess the CEO. They get him to build this Ed 209, this RoboCop, right? This gigantic, bulky monstrosity with guns for hands and all that. And so this is him unveiling Ed 209 in one of the funniest and most horrific scenes in movie history. I just love it.
Take a close look at the track record of this company, and you'll see that we have gambled in markets traditionally regarded as non-profit. Hospitals, prisons, space exploration. I say good business is where you find it. As you know, we've entered into a contract with the city to run local law enforcement. But at Security Concepts, we believe an efficient police force is only part of the solution. No, we need something more. We need a 24-hour-a-day police officer. A cop who doesn't need to eat or sleep. A cop with superior firepower and the reflexes to use it. Fellow executives, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the future of law enforcement. Ed 209.
It's just like this great Stan Winston work, just stop motion at its finest. And yeah, it's like old fashioned now. I could see how kids are like, oh, that's a process shot. Like they would know what a process shot would be. But yeah, it's just Ed 209, clearly just a very small puppet, right? That they're putting against just force perspective, foregrounding. But it's just an incredibly good effect. It's like everything works here. It's the music, the way the music starts up, the sound effects, and of course the Stan Winston stop motion effects too.
Series 209 is a self-sufficient law enforcement robot. 209 is currently programmed for urban pacification, but that is only the beginning. After a successful tour of duty in old Detroit, we can expect 209 to become the hot military product for the next decade. Dr. McNamara.
We need an arrest subject.
Mr. Kenny. Yes, sir.
Oh, don't do it. Don't do it, Kenny.
Yes,
no,
sir.
this poor bastard.
He's going to help us simulate a typical arrest and disarming procedure. Mr. Kenny, use your gun in a threatening manner. Oh, pointed at Ed 209.
Yes, sir.
I love that Ed 209 doesn't flinch at all when Kenny holds the gun to somebody else, like would actually happen in the real world or in old Detroit. Like Ed 209 doesn't care if you're aiming the gun at anybody else. It just cares if you're aiming it at him. So, God, Kenny, you poor bastard.
Please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply.
I think you'd better do what he says, Mr. Kenny.
You now have 15 seconds to comply.
Everybody starts freaking out. This is not part of the script.
1:13, section 9. You now have 5 seconds to comply.
And they're all pushing him into it. He's trying to get help. Nobody's helping. And yeah, this is the R-rated version. The unrated version has about 15 more seconds of Kenny just being eviscerated. Oh, and that was the scene. Somebody want to call a paramedic? Yeah. That was the scene that the video clerk said was like, oh, your kid will love that. It's so funny. And my mom bought into it. So yeah, I remember taking RoboCop home thinking it was a PG-rated movie. And yeah, naturally being, I think it was probably more horrified by RoboCop than anything else that I saw as a child. But oddly very fascinated by it, right? Because that's the thing about crime, is that when we see it in movies, it can be kind of fun and thrilling and exciting. You know, it's that kind of catharsis, that thing in our lizard hindbrain that wants to do something that we know we're not supposed to be doing and then get away with it, right? And so we relate to a lot of criminals. A lot of movies are based around criminals, criminal activity. But when it actually happens to us in real life, you know, it's just not fun. It's annoying. And can be kind of dangerous at the same time. So, right. I don't know. I wonder what would have happened if I had caught these people. We always think about that, right? If I saw somebody like stealing my motorcycle, would I have confronted them on it? I don't know. I mean, you don't want to mess with people who are doing something that they know they shouldn't be doing. So I don't know. So I'm checking on the grill, and yeah, we're about there. Probably about another 5 minutes before we're at a good grilling temperature. So yeah, just taking like a mini vacation. Just find little times to just sit on the porch and unwind and all that. And that's kind of what I'm doing tonight. And I'm watching RoboCop. So, and yeah, I've got a nice cigar for after, and I've got some bullet bourbon that I'll be having in a minute. You know what? This is vacation. Let me just go ahead and just open this now. Have it now, right? Need a glass. Think about my parents. They don't really have any whiskey glasses. Drink out of this. Got this little mug that I had when I was a kid that I would drink milk out of. It's got these, it's like green happy faces on it. This mug is probably like 40 years old. Here it is. Here's to vacation. Right here. Yeah. It's good. So, hope you're doing well tonight. I've been, it's a strange time right now. I think, the weeks after July 4th, right? Like the 4th of July, America's, what was this year? 200 and I guess 47, is that right? 246th birthday, something like that. Yeah, I think it was 247. Yeah, it was last week. And so the week after July 4th is always so strange because it's almost like all the major summer events have kind of gone by now. You had your Memorial Day, and then you had like June, which is where everybody does all their big summer stuff, vacation, I guess. And I don't know. And then in July 4th, everything kind of builds up to that. And then after July 4th, it's like I was at Target today and I started seeing signs for back to school sales. And yeah, that's when it just, and you go into Cracker Barrel and they start putting out all the Halloween stuff. It just feels like after the 4th of July, we sort of begin to give ourselves permission to move on with the year. I don't know, but I don't know. I still like it being summer. Yeah, I said earlier that I was going to a job. It's like my job right now is essentially just delivering food, delivering packages, whatever I can do to just make some money and keep afloat until I start teaching again next month. I got an email today from my boss at the University Writing Center asking me to come back in the fall and tutor students in writing, so I'll get a little bit of extra money from that. So, and yeah, just I've been applying for other jobs, as you may recall, or maybe you don't. I completed my master's degree in English literature back in April, and for the last couple of years before that, I was just completing graduate school full time, and I was teaching freshman composition classes at the university where I was completing my degree. And so all of that's over, right? Like my stipend, my contract position is over now. And even though I'll be staying on with the university as an adjunct tutor and an adjunct professor throughout the fall, after that, like I can continue doing that as long as I want to, as long as they'll have me. But the idea is really to get some kind of a permanent full-time position that actually, gives you health benefits and all that stuff. But I don't know. I mean, it's all up in the air right now. I've been feeling very directionless, I gotta say. I don't know if I've never necessarily been like depressed. Like, I don't want to go that far, but it has been feeling a little just like, I don't know, like a little bit directionless lately, in the fact that for the last 2 years, I had a definite destination, right? Getting my second master's degree and teaching while I was doing that. And now that I'm out, it's one of these things where you're not really sure what the next steps are. Like, I guess I know, like I have been putting out job applications and I've been looking for teaching positions. But there's also that thing, that feeling that comes with having finished a major task and, done it in good standing, not burning any bridges or anything like that, but just, finishing it well. And then being like, okay, now what? What am I going to do next? What's the next thing, right? Again, I think like the next thing is something that hopefully nets me an income of some kind, right? Because that's not what going back to school does. But you go back to school so that you can, get a job and get an income or something. But I don't know. I think that the natural thing to do would probably be to apply and go back to teach high school, because that's what I did for 5 years. That's what I have I have a master's in education and a teaching certificate. Reminder to renew that, by the way. So I think that expires this year. But I've got that. And I've got another master's in English literature, so I think I'm well qualified to get a job. Not to say that I'm cocky, like I don't know if I can immediately apply to a job and be hired. There's a lot of factors that go into that, other than just the experience and the credentials you have. But I am totally fine not teaching high school anymore. I did that already. I enjoyed it. I haven't really missed it all that much, to be honest with you. And not to say that I had a bad experience teaching high school. It just isn't something that I think I want to do for the rest of my life. It's, teaching high school is a grind, and so little of it really has to do with the actual act of your content area, right? There is a lot of politics that go into that, and I don't know. I think like when I was teaching college, even though a lot of people say that college can get way more political than high school, and I'm not deluded, I know that it can. I think any job that you work can be political, but when I was teaching high school composition, college composition, I was so low on the totem pole that none of the politics got to me. And when I went in and did my job, I was just teaching composition, and I was grading papers, and I was working with students. And I just went through an entire year of teaching college that was just teaching. That's all it was. It was the ultimate act of teaching distilled down into its purest form. And there were no administrators that I had to work directly with. Right, there was just none of that. And so I think just for now, I am comfortable just continuing to teach college composition, even though I know that's not sustainable, right? There's no benefits that come with that. There's no upward mobility. There's nothing like I'm going to get promoted or anything like that. I may have the chance a little bit further down the line, if a job comes open, to get a full-time position there. That would be great. But, my graduate advisor, when I told this to her, she said, that's always possible, but keep in mind that, generally when somebody gets hired to teach as a full-time professor here, they're either on a tenure track, and or B, they have a PhD. It's going to be tough, right? So I'm looking for other places where maybe I can do that. Maybe I can teach full time, but I don't know. At the same time, maybe teaching is just not where it goes, right? Maybe teaching is just not where I want to go with what I do next. And I think all this is to say I'm just kind of keeping my options open right now. It's an exciting place to be, but it is, as I said, can be kind of directionless, right? It's always a tough position to be in when after you've just had 2 years of people telling you what you need to do next, and then you're no longer talking to those people and it's just you making your own decisions. I've been in that position before, and it's weird. Just it never changes, and how weird it just is. To just to be perpetually just doing new things in life. I don't know. All right, I think this grill's almost ready. So I'm gonna throw a steak on there and start this.
Yes, I understand.
What about tracking? You can check his exact location at all times if you want to be. How does he eat? His digestive system is extremely simple. This processor dispenses a rudimentary paste that sustains his organic system.
Tastes like baby food. Knock yourself out.
Okay, let's start with tracking.
Give me a grid.
Got it?
Target. Target. Now follow. Voice stress analyzer. 1, 2, 3. Record. Now playback.
Bring it up 50%.
Now playback.
Bring it up 50%.
Give me a full frame.
All right, clear out.
What are your prime directives?
Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law.
That's good. It's very good.
Training RoboCop. I mentioned earlier how Ray Wise, who played Leland Palmer very famously on Twin Peaks, is in RoboCop. And yeah, of course, Miguel Ferrer is in this also. Remember, he's in Twin Peaks as the FBI agent. Rosenfeld, is it? Right. Yeah, a lot of talent in RoboCop. I guess you really can't forgive me or my mom for thinking that RoboCop was like a for kids. Because yeah, there were like RoboCop cartoons, and it was weird in the 80s. There was a lot of violent movies that passed themselves off, I guess, for the purposes of franchising as kids' properties. Like The Toxic Avenger, which is one of the most violent movies ever made, and vile, utterly tasteless movies ever made, had a cartoon. Right? So, it's a weird time. I guess that's what you see today in like the Deadpool movie. I'm not by any means a fan of Deadpool, but I think it's the same concept where it's an R-rated movie, but he's a superhero or something. I think that's what it is. I don't know. But yeah. Steak's coming along pretty nicely now. And I've got some Brussels sprouts to go with it. You gotta have a green, right? You need some greens. Yeah. Well, it's pretty juicy. I'm gonna flip this in probably about 5 minutes. Set a timer. So, marinated it with some marinade, but I also put like some onion powder, some garlic salt, Italian seasoning on it, so it should be really nice to eat while I watch the violence of RoboCop. There's just something so fun and so simplistic, right, about eating food while you're watching a movie. I don't know. It's just, I'm a little worried because I have a hard time eating at home without having some kind of television on, watching something. No, I don't know how I train myself out of this. So, anyway, I am, was talking earlier about how this summer has felt sort of directionless, and I guess what I was really meaning to talk about was how it's been really difficult this summer for me to read, for me to sit down for a lengthy amount of time and just read a physical book. I've been listening to audiobooks quite a lot, like while I've been out driving, delivering food or whatever. But in terms of just sitting down and reading a physical book, it's been very difficult for me. And, you know, this is, again, I spent the last, year of my life devoted to reading and writing about a single book. You know, that was Cormac McCarthy's Suttree. And the whole time while I was doing that thesis for my master's degree, you know, all I could think about the whole time was, what am I going to read when I'm free, when I don't have to write about this book anymore, when I can just sit down and enjoy a book and not have to write about it? What am I going to read? And I just had I had a list of books, right? And I haven't attacked any of them. And I think that I don't know why this is, why am having such a hard time just sitting down and concentrating on a single book. And the week after I finished my thesis, I sat down and began reading Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. It's a book that I've started many times but have never finished, and I talked about this on a show a while back. And I read about 350 pages of that book in a couple of weeks. I was going through it very quickly, and I was on a good track to finish it. But if you've read Thomas Pynchon, you know how it is. I mean, it's just, he commands all of your attention. It's like a full-time job to read Thomas Pynchon. He's a very wonderful, but also very dense and very serious literary author who, reading one of his books is not just, you don't just read one of his books. You read, entire websites, you read compendiums. It's just, so I was reading Gravity's Rainbow, which is considered by many to be one of the most difficult books of the 20th century. That's what I chose to go into after I just finished reading, right, a very serious book by Cormac McCarthy. So, I'm still reading Gravity's Rainbow. I'm reading it very steadily, but what I did is sometimes you don't want to read, that kind of book. So you go and get something that's easy to read, that you can just sit down and read as if you were watching, like with as little brain power as it takes to watch a television show, right? And so, just a very passive read. So yeah, I went to the bookstore and I got a couple of books. This is about 2 months ago. And I've been reading them very steadily, and just for some reason, for whatever reason, I just can only sit down and read for about 10 minutes at a time. Now, in those 10 minutes, I blow through about 20 or 30 pages. Despite being a very slow reader, if it's just a plot that is very much based on or a book that's very much based on plot, right? Like I've got an Elmore Leonard book. Like I can read Elmore Leonard, who's just a crime writer, but a very good crime writer. Like I can read him very, very fast. But still, if you read 30 pages in about 10 minutes or so, it's only 30 pages of about a 300-page book. So it's just been very difficult for me, and I just don't know why this is. And I think it's because I am used to reading under deadlines, right? Like working on my thesis, I was very much relegated to, reading and writing about it and turning in that writing on deadlines and everything. And so it was very rigidly structured. And now that I'm not doing that anymore, when I sit down to read, I'm like, well, can do this, or I can listen to a podcast. I can just watch television. There's nobody telling me that I have to read this right now. And I think that's the thing. Even though it's something that, like, this has happened to me a couple of times in the past couple of weeks. I'll be reading something and I'll be really into it, but then for whatever reason, I'll just put the book down. I won't come back to it for a couple of days. So, I think it's just my reading habits are so off because of the last year, that I'm just taking some time to kind of get acclimated to it, because it is something that I've always really enjoyed and something that I've been proud about too, especially, you know, with my history of working with students who are dyslexic. Reading is something that if you can do it, you should really do it. You should be thankful that you can do it, because a lot of us have no idea when we learned how to just read. We just did it. And we often did it in elementary school because it was something that we were required to do and something that we were asked to do. And some of us did it in those very early days of childhood as a way to show our friends how fast we could read, to, you know, get up on them. And all of these tricks that I guess teachers used along the way, as well as our parents, you know, they just suddenly taught you how to read. So reading is something that a lot of people can do very effortlessly, but they just choose not to, because, you know, we live in a world where there's so many other things to do. And reading is something that you do. It's like, you know, me deciding to eat when I'm not watching television. You know, reading is something that a lot of people, in order to really do it, have to turn off everything around them and just focus it on the printed page. You know, a lot of people, when they read, can't have music going on. They can't have television because it just distracts them. And so, when they sit down to read, they have to have everything off, and that's very, very difficult for a lot of people. You know, it's like the loudest thing in the world to a lot of people is silence, just complete silence, right? When they just have their own thoughts in their head. And, but yeah, reading is something that I've always been really grateful that I can do, that I learned somewhere along the way to do, and that I take a lot of enjoyment out of. And it often does depress me. It sinks me to a little bit of a low when I have time to read and I just don't want to read. And I sometimes guilt trip myself. Well, why aren't you reading right now? You know, there's nothing on television. You know, you've circled through, you looked at everything that's on Netflix. It's all boring, right? So read a book, you idiot. You stupid, dumb boy, right? So I need to get myself out of that, but I don't know. I feel, this summer I have been reading some really good books. I just haven't finished any of them, and that is something that I do sometimes. If one book just kind of gets a little bit tedious to me, or if I just am getting a little bored with it, I'll go to something else. And sometimes, I think most people have about 5 or 6 books going at once. So, yeah, but I'm almost done with this one book that I picked up. Again, this is about 2 months ago, and I picked it up just because I wanted something to read when I was in my car, or when I was just taking a break from delivering food, and I didn't want to pull out Thomas Pynchon's massive 700-page tome, Gravity's Rainbow. I just wanted something simple and with a plot. And I went to the bookstore, the used bookstore, and I got this book called The Paperboy by the author Pete Dexter. And I was reading the plot, and I was like, oh, the title and the plot, this sounds very familiar to this book that came out a few years ago with Matthew McConaughey called The Paperboy, and sure enough it is. I haven't seen the movie. I am anxious to watch the movie, and that's one of my motivations to finish this book. I've got about 50 pages left. How long is this book? It's like 328 pages. And right now I am on page 263. So, a little bit more than 50 pages or so left. I don't know. But, Yeah, and this book, The Paperboy by Pete Dexter, kind of hits all of my buttons in terms of what I want to read during the summer. You know, it's like a book with a plot, and it's a thriller, and it's also kind of Southern Gothic, like it takes place in the Florida Panhandle, and they also go down to like Miami. So there's a lot of just like descriptions of humid weather and the swamp and, you know, all that stuff that I'm familiar with being from the deep South. And so yeah, that's that's good. And yeah, the book is really good. The first time when I first got it, I opened it up and instantly read about 50 pages of it. You know, while I was sitting in the Office Max parking lot waiting for an order on Amazon. But yeah, that was like 2 months ago. I went for like several weeks without reading a page and then came back to it, and I've been steadily reading it this week. I've gone through about 150 pages or so this week just reading it. But yeah, the Paperboy is a good book. It's takes place in like the early 70s. And it's about this death row inmate who's been sentenced for, you know, killing this local redneck racist sheriff in Florida, in a small town in Florida. Of course, it's a small town. Right? And so the main character, this kid named Jack, gets hired by his newspaper reporter brother to drive him around all these back roads and swamps of the Florida Panhandle, investigating this murder to find out if this guy really did it. Because the guy that they convicted comes from like this hillbilly, you know, bayou dwelling family that does crime, and they're like this redneck crime family. And so it seems very obvious to pin the murder of the sheriff on this guy, but this newspaper reporter feels like he didn't do it. So he and the main character, the guy who narrates the book, Jack, are going all over to try and solve the murder. But it's a lot more than like a crime thriller. Like at the same time, there's a lot of you know, kind of social commentary going on in the book, I guess you can say. There's like a lot of just commentary on the way that the you know, politics were in the 70s in the South. You know, racial politics, you know, like sexual politics and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a good book. Yeah, this author Pete Dexter, I've read a book by him before called Paris Trout, which won the National Book Award in like 1990. He often likes to write like very lean, chiseled, I guess what you could say like call masculine fiction, right? About small town life in the 60s and 70s. And he wrote the book Deadwood, which is about Deadwood, South Dakota, but it's not the book that they based the HBO series on. I thought it was, but it's still got all the same characters. It's essentially just historical fiction of like Wild Bill Hickok and what's her name, Calamity Jane, and all them. Jack McCall, the guy who shot Wild Bill Hickok over the dead man's hand, you know, aces and eights. So, yeah. All right, this steak, I believe, is done. I'm going to cut into it just to see if it's as I like it. I should do more podcasts while I'm grilling. I know. My parents' house right now. I'm trying to find... My mom still has these Cutco knives that I sold her when I was a freshman in college, like 24 years ago. I sold knives for this like company very briefly. The company was a scam, but the knives weren't. They still work really well. I don't think she's ever sharpened them. I cut my steak with a Cutco knife. Oh yeah. Ignorance is bliss. Okay, that was a very good dinner. What, sweetie? Sweetie. over here at the house. I can't leave until I get both the cats back in the house. They go outside, and one of them, Sweetie, who is my grandmother's cat, but my grandmother is in a retirement home up in North Carolina, and she can't have her cat up there, so my mom is taking care of her. And the other one, Mickey, is somewhere around here. Sweetie doesn't like me very much, or is very skeptical of just basically any human, but Mickey's a lot more cool, so I can't leave until Mickey gets back in the house. So. But it's okay. It's a good excuse, I guess, to be here. And after dinner, after a good meal, there's nothing like a good cigar. Isn't that what Clint Eastwood says in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? I think. Yeah. And whiskey. He forgot the whiskey, so I'm having some whiskey now. Some Bullet Bourbon. And I'm stepping out here on the porch. Have a cigar, which I already started. Just taking a break there to pour myself a little bit more. Nice night here in mid-July. It is very humid out tonight. Fortunately, there's a table fan here you can hear. It's keeping me cool. I never even thought about it. I guess maybe I have, but I never thought to look it up. But, when you're watching a fan go, and it's going so fast, and you, as you move yourself from the perimeter of the fan to the inside of it, what do they call that, the radius? I forgot about geometry, but, yeah, it appears to be spinning backwards. And I looked that up last night. I was sitting under the fan, under the ceiling fan, just lying on the bed, actually, and looking up at it. It's like, what is that? What is that called? So I reached for Google, and it's called the reverse motion effect. The farther away you get from something that's rotating, it appears to be going in the opposite way. It's like when you're on, when you're on the highway and you see cars and wheels going round and round. You see, it looks like the hubcaps are spinning the opposite way. So I think that has something to do with the theory of relativity. I'm not sure. But anyway, so I'm out here, and it was just a few minutes later. I just had my steak dinner with Brussels sprouts. Finished RoboCop, and I was listening to an audiobook here. As I said, I've been listening to like a lot of audiobooks just because I've been in the car, and I also find it's nice to just sit outside at night and listen to a book. And I've been listening to Fletch by Gregory Macdonald. You may know Fletch as that Chevy Chase movie from I think it was 1985, and they made another one a few years later called Fletch Lives. The first one was based on the Gregory Macdonald novel, the novel I've been listening to, and the second one wasn't based on one of his other novels. There's many Fletch novels. And I'd recommend the series. I haven't listened to or even read. I remember reading the physical copy of Son of Fletch a few years ago. It's like he's got a son, and he's living in Tennessee, and his son gets involved with a bunch of white supremacists or something. As a lot of heroes in Southern crime novels tend to do. But yeah, I think Fletch Lives from 1989 with Chevy Chase. I think it's not based on another one of the Gregory Macdonald novels, because Fletch is a very hard-boiled kind of character. He's an investigative reporter who has in the books, has a very curt, direct way of speaking. And even though he is kind of a wise ass, sometimes they shaped the novel quite a bit to fit Chevy Chase's personality. And so I think that's why they made up their own story for Fletch Lives and didn't base it on one of the novels because they wanted to go a much broader direction with it. And even though I think Fletch is just your standard run-of-the-mill crime series hero, it doesn't really fit Chevy Chase's personality. I think they basically took him and shoehorned him into that first novel, and then they just made up something for the second movie, which is not as good, not nearly as good as the first Fletch movie. I like the first Fletch movie, and it's based pretty closely. This is the first time I've ever read or listened to that first novel, and it's very good. I've actually found myself getting really into it. Like with most audiobooks, since I have such a short attention span for audio, which is kind of ironic because I do a podcast, I know, but whenever I listen to an audiobook, it usually has to be either a fiction book that I've read before and kind of know the story of, or it needs to be like a nonfiction book that tells an interesting true story that I can get into. And so I listen to like a lot of nonfiction audiobooks, but Fletch is the rare example of a book that I've never read. I don't know the story to. I do know the movie, but the movie is I haven't seen it in many years, and so I don't really know the story by heart. But I am enjoying. I'm like an hour away from the ending of the book, and things are kind of coming to a head, right? Like Fletch is, he's an investigative reporter with a Los Angeles newspaper, and as the book opens, this millionaire, this guy named Alan Stanwyck, who I think is played by Tim Matheson in the movie, or Tim Daly, one of those Tims, not Timothy Hutton. I think he was too young still, but maybe it was Timothy Matheson. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, this guy named Alan Stanwyck is a millionaire, and he hires Fletch to kill him. He doesn't know Fletch is a reporter. He thinks he's like a beach bum, like a druggie, because Fletch is on the beach undercover investigating like this narcotics ring. And so he hires Fletch thinking he's like just a drifter, and he says, "I'll give you $50,000 to kill me." And so Fletch is like, "Why would I kill you?" He says, "I've got cancer, and I've got too much pride to have cancer eat away at me, and if you kill me, then I'll give you $50,000, and my wife will get the insurance money, and everybody will be happy." So the book is all about Fletch investigating why Alan Stanwyck wants somebody to kill him because he appears healthy, doesn't appear to have cancer. And of course, at the same time, as almost all crime novels are, there's a second case where Fletch is trying to uncover the mystery of who's supplying this drug dealer at the beach, and he suspects it's like the local police chief. So it's a good book. I'm really surprised. I don't normally read a lot of like crime fiction. As I said, I read Elmore Leonard. I think he's kind of the best, but it's not a genre with like a lot of standards, I guess. It's just a lot of it's very kind of predictable, and even though I know that a lot of people just rave like Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett as truly great writers, it at the end of the day is like very pulpy, and it's good summer reading because you want to read it. It's just hard to find a good one, like a really good one. And I'm enjoying Fletch quite a bit. Like, I'm not a book snob, even though I did just write a thesis on like Cormac McCarthy, and I love Thomas Pynchon and all that. I if I'm gonna like spend my time reading a book, as I said, it takes a lot of concentration to sit down and read a book. I just want it to be a good one, and it's very difficult to find a really good crime fiction. So I'm gonna relight my cigar. So So, the last few nights, I've been revisiting a reality show that I used to watch about 20 years ago, and I've never been one for reality television. On that, I can say I'm a definite snob. I think there are much better things to do than watch, real people kind of fight with each other. And obviously, there's a lot of made-up situations on reality television. But one reality show that I did watch back in the day that, if you can call 20 years ago back in the day, and really got into was this show called Project Greenlight. And you may hear that show and think on it fondly. I think it's very much forgotten now, even though I know that they did do a 4th season about 10 years ago. And they recently did another season on HBO, which I don't think anybody watched. But Project Greenlight is a show that began, I believe, in 2002. And it was Matt Damon and Ben Affleck when, after they had won the Academy Award for writing Good Will Hunting. Their story was one of those Hollywood curiosities because they were two people who, although they had been acting for a while in Hollywood, managed to get together and write this movie that I think is objectively a really good movie. Good Will Hunting, about that kid who's a math genius, but he's also a troubled kid. And Robin Williams is like the psychiatrist who helps him unlock his potential. It's a good movie. It's a little bit cornball and cheesy when we think back on it now, and it's been parodied a whole lot. But as I said on a show a couple weeks back, one of the roommates I used to have, I called him Good Will Hunting because he was an engineering student. And he would write like equations on his window and all that. And that's like a kind of an iconic scene from Good Will Hunting. But Ben Affleck and Matt Damon had this idea to hold this contest where they would have this nationwide search. In the first season, it was one person, a writer-director, and in later seasons, it was like one director, or it was directors and then writing. They would have 2 competitions for writing and directing. But yeah, the person they would find, they would just pluck him or her out of obscurity and have them suddenly at the helm of I think the first couple of seasons it was $1 million they gave them to make a movie. And then later on, I think the budget went up some. So, but I really liked this show back then, obviously, because as a young man in the early 2000s, like everybody else, I was very interested in making movies. I really wanted to write movies, and as I talked about on last week's show, my friends and I was among friends who wanted to do the same thing, so we were all really big fans of Project Greenlight. And even though I think there is some manipulation by producers to eke out a lot of drama on the show, I think by and large the show's pretty accurate. Now I've never been at the helm of like a big movie before, but it looks like the show seems to depict pretty accurately what it must be like to not only just produce a movie but also market it, get it out there for people to see. And because all 3 of the movies that they made in the first season did come out in theaters, and they very quickly were pulled out of theaters because they didn't make any money. And they were all marketed as the Project Greenlight movie, so you were seeing the movie basically out of curiosity, to watch what kind of a product they turned out, among all the fighting and everything. But I think the show, if it does anything, it really does, especially now as I'm revisiting it. It makes you realize that in these days where you're on streaming services, like you're on Netflix or Amazon or HBO or Tubi or Pluto TV, you're just going through scrolling through endless boxes that represent movies. And that every one of these movies, after watching Project Greenlight, had like hundreds of thousands of phone calls going back and forth, decisions being made, casting that isn't realized. And when you watch Project Greenlight, you're just amazed that any good movie could ever possibly be made. It really does represent the process as just being grueling and not fun, and sort of like teaching. The actual art or craft is a very, very small part of it, and everything else is just politics, right? So I didn't watch season 1 because it just I don't know, for whatever reason I really wanted to see season 2, because I just remember that one being the biggest train wreck of them all, right? The movie that they chose was written by this I think student from Ohio, this woman named Erica Beanie. She wrote this screenplay called The Battle of Shaker Heights, and that movie is notable, aside from just being a Project Greenlight movie, for kind of being one of the first films of the actor Shia LaBeouf, who I think he's still working today, but it was right before he kind of took off as a very major child star. He was in movies like the Transformers movies, and I think he was in this kid's movie called Holes, I think. I just remember seeing the trailer for Holes when I was in a movie theater one time, and somebody just said in the back, "Yeah, stick it in the hole." It's, back when you would go to movies and movie theaters and they would be crowded with people, and people would just like react to the trailers, but yeah, season 2 sticks out in my mind as just being a big train wreck, because not that I don't think the movie was particularly bad that they made. It's just the directors they chose were just kind of these dorks who just, instead of focusing on directing the movie, they would just pick fights that weren't necessary. And I remember there was one moment where one of the directors, this guy Ephraim Patel, Erica Beanie was a transplant. She came to LA to like work on the movie, and she didn't have a car, so the production gave her a car to get around in, and Ephraim Patel felt really angry about this, even though he lived in Los Angeles and he had a car to get around in, so he demanded a car. And so he took time. Everybody took their time out of the production to get him a car, right? So he ended up getting a Range Rover, which made his directing partner really mad because he didn't get a car. So, but yeah, it's just it is just a weird reminder that I think season 2 was produced in 2003, and the directors who entered the competition were asked to submit a directing video that showed how good of directors they could be. And the two directors who ended up winning, Ephraim Patel and Kyle Rankin, they sent in this movie that, of all people, had Ray Wise in it. So their director's submission video had major talent in it. Leland Palmer, who had also been in RoboCop. And they said that they had just met Ray Wise in Hollywood and just asked him to be in some of their spec movies. And Ray Wise just loved working with them, so they got him in that movie, in their director submission movie, that they just said, like, pick us, we're directors, But yeah, the submission that they gave had like all these really cheesy After Effects, like After Effects where you could put in people and just do weird video effects with it and all that. It was very foreign, in 2003 to be able to make some of those effects happen, but a couple years later, everybody was doing it. It just became, using After Effects was just something that everybody suddenly did around 2005 or 2006. I remember my old roommate Hunter, who was a video editor, was a big fan of After Effects and used After Effects to like make sci-fi movies, and it was just a very easy way to, do computer generation, but in 2003, you had to have like a lot of money and a really good computer to do that kind of stuff. And so they made a movie where they used a lot of After Effects, and it's so funny because they keep on cutting back to it in Project Greenlight. Like every time they talk about how good of directors they were, they keep cutting back to their After Effects shots, and by today's standards, it just looks so goofy. But Matt Damon and Ben Affleck just can't stop laughing, and at some of the effects they do. Like there's a scene where they have one of the directors is introducing himself. It's like, I'm Kyle Rankin, and I'm just so happy, and then suddenly his directing partner drives up behind him and runs over a dog, and of course the dog effect just looks like a cardboard dog being run over in After Effects. And Kyle Rankin's like, or Ephraim Patel is driving the car, and he's like, sorry I had to do that, Kyle, and it's a big joke. And they keep on cutting to Matt Damon and Ben Affleck just talking about how great these guys are at directing, even though they're just using After Effects. But everybody was just so enamored by it, and they're so excited about it that they bring in, yes, Harvey Weinstein to look at the video. So Harvey Weinstein is laughing at the After Effects dog being run over, and that's the funniest thing in season 2 of Project Greenlight, is everybody keeps on talking about how much they love Harvey Weinstein. So and yeah, and so Project Greenlight season 2 is just for the longest time you couldn't find it. I think HBO has disowned the show. I think mostly because of Harvey Weinstein's involvement. But I think also just because, HBO just has this big catalog of shows that they've done going all the way back to the 90s. They've got Arliss on there, which is like notoriously one of the worst shows that HBO's ever done, even though I like Arliss with Robert Wool, the sports agent. But yeah, there's something about it. They're just so not proud of Project Greenlight that they just don't even have it on their streaming service anymore. But fortunately, somebody went on YouTube and posted the entire second and third season, so thank God, But yeah, so I've and then season 3, of course, is ironically, it's funny. It's like the last season of Project Greenlight they did for the longest time until, again, I think it was 2014 when they brought it back. And season 3 is funny because they said, no movie that we've ever made with Project Greenlight has made money. That's why this season we've got to make a movie that makes money. And so they chose the easiest route possible. They chose to make a genre horror movie, this movie called Feast. And that movie ended up making money. It ended up making actually good money. So much so that they made 2 direct-to-streaming sequels. But even though they did really well, they finally achieved what they wanted with Project Greenlight Season 3. They didn't make another one for years. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Matt Damon was so vocal in how unpleased he was with the movie they made. Because Matt Damon said, I got into Project Greenlight to actually make movies of quality, and you guys want to make a cheap monster movie. And so after the first episode of the 3rd season of Project Greenlight, you never see Matt Damon again. He's so disgusted. And when they made season 4 years later, Matt Damon came back and he said, after Greenlight season 3, me and Ben Affleck didn't talk for years. That movie almost ruined our friendship. So they were really upset about that. But yeah, it's a fascinating show to go back and watch. I don't know. I mean, I think I probably revisit it about once every 6 or 7 years. Just go back and just watch the old seasons. I used to watch them like whenever they would be on some weird obscure site on the internet, but now they're finally on YouTube. So I'd highly recommend going and watching them. It's just I think they really do I kind of gave up the idea of wanting to go back and make films many years ago because the collaborative aspect of it was so disheartening and so difficult, especially when you're making movies with all your friends who love making movies. Just the egos and the unpleasant qualities in your friends come out when you're making movies, and it's very easy for friendships to become permanently dismembered after you make a movie or in the process of making a movie. And I've talked before on the show how this podcast, The Midnight Citizen, came about because I was just so tired of trying to produce films and make films with my friends. Even though even though I'm still good friends with everybody, I just feel like we had to stop doing that or we weren't going to be friends anymore. Because everybody kind of, has such a great morale going into it, and then as you get into it, decisions get made, and people suddenly realize that their vision is different than your vision. And especially when some people are more committed to it than others. It was a good time to just start doing a podcast because I was like, all I have to worry about is me. If I don't put out a podcast or if my podcast sucks, I'm the only one there is to blame for it, right? And so, when you watch like Project Greenlight season 3, for instance, it's interesting because they choose this director named John Gulager, whose father is Clu Gulager, kind of a big character actor. He was in The Last Picture Show, the guy who rapes Sybil Shepherd over the pool table in Sam the Lion's Bar, if you ever saw that movie. But John Gulager, who is just this 47-year-old mumbly, stuttery little guy, you would have... that's one of the reasons that I think the show is engineered, is because there's no way they would have ever chosen him if the cameras were not rolling. He comes in, he doesn't have a good pitch for his direction of the movie. There's nothing about him that says that he is the guy who everybody on a movie set would be looking to do a good job. But, John Gulager comes in, and the first thing he does is he meets with the casting director. And he immediately tells the casting director, okay, these 5 parts I've already cast. And she's like, what are you talking about? And he cast the 5 major parts in the movie with his friends and family. And they said, like, you can't do that. He's like, well, why? And they're like, well, because we're making a movie for a major studio, and we can't market the movie based on your girlfriend being the star. So that's a lot of drama in the first few episodes. But he kind of did it opposite. Like, he found a way to make really good movies before he got to Project Greenlight using just his friends and family. So it worked for him, I guess. But, But yeah, then they get into making the movie, and it's just bringing all these people in who are acknowledging the fact that we're working on a game show. We're not making a movie. We're producing a game show. This guy won a contest, this guy John Gulager. So we owe him no respect at all. And so the cards are just kind of stacked against him. That's the one thing about Project Greenlight that's like, this is not an accurate depiction of making a movie. Because all these people are just being forced to work with this guy who won a contest, right? So, but yeah, it's an interesting show. I will say, like, every season they do, except for the 4th and 5th season, where they partner with HBO. Every season they do, they partner with Miramax, because obviously Ben Affleck and Matt Damon were big independent stars. That's how they got Good Will Hunting made, is by going through Miramax and like Harvey and Bob Weinstein. And if you remember the 90s, Miramax was the gold standard of independent film. They were responsible, of course, for Pulp Fiction and, Shakespeare in Love and all these big movies. And Harvey Weinstein, everybody now knows. Like, the public knows. I think Hollywood knew a long time before the public really knew. But Harvey Weinstein was, a big bully, and he would, buy Academy Awards for his movies. He would just, his actions in the 90s essentially exposed the Academy Awards as just essentially being this big racket where you can just buy votes, and something that was done for many, many years. I read this book not too long ago about Disney, about, what was it? Oh, no, not Disney, DreamWorks. DreamWorks was this independent film company that was started by Steven Spielberg, David Geffen, and Jeffrey Katzenberg in the mid-90s. And they produced a lot of movies, and the major upset, obviously, was at the Academy Awards in 1998. They had produced Saving Private Ryan, and that was the favorite to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. Everybody knew that was going to win. And then Shakespeare in Love comes in, this movie that nobody saw, that is not a good movie. I think it maybe is a good movie. It's not a great movie. Comes in and wins Best Picture, and everybody was really upset about that. And in this book, they interview one of the campaign directors for the Saving Private Ryan Oscar campaign of '98. And she said, yeah, that was basically done. Harvey Weinstein engineered Shakespeare in Love as the Best Picture winner because it was just all about schmoozing the Oscar voters, because they are, at the end of the day, just producers. They want to be schmoozed and told how great they are, and they want to be given gifts and all that stuff. And the next year, DreamWorks had this movie up for another Academy Award for Best Picture, American Beauty. And even though American Beauty is a totally fine movie, the director of the Saving Private Ryan Oscar campaign essentially just stole Harvey Weinstein's playbook and did everything that Weinstein did, and American Beauty won. So, yeah, there's just been a ton of books, namely this book by Peter Biskind called Down and Dirty Pictures about, Miramax and the world of independent filmmaking in the 90s. And also that DreamWorks book that I told you about, that have just exposed the Academy Awards, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s, as just being a racket. And in no way whatsoever representing what people really thought about these movies, but how much they got. So, but yeah, and so the first 3 Project Greenlight seasons were, all produced by Miramax. And I think they did themselves a big disservice, other than the fact that Harvey Weinstein was the head of it, by doing Project Greenlight. And that may be ultimately why season 3 was their last one, because Miramax throughout the 90s and early 2000s was known as the bastion of ballsy filmmaking, of kind of throwing committees to the studios, and just following the director, kind of in the same way that United Artists, under the founding of, Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford, had done in the 20s, and all the way up through the 1970s. United Artists was a studio that was giving a lot more leeway to the director and just letting the director do whatever they wanted, and letting the studio just stand back and letting them do that. And of course, that all came to a crashing halt with the movie Heaven's Gate. But I'm getting way too down the rabbit hole here. But Miramax was following the United Artists model of just following the director, letting the director have all the power. And what Project Greenlight did was it exposed that Miramax was really no better than any of the rest of them. It was, they would bring in these directors who, yes, admittedly were very green, but they essentially had just this committee of executives, and come down and take the movie away bit by bit from the director over the course of each season of Project Greenlight. So I think it just made Miramax look very bad and no better than the rest of them. So, but that's my little theory. I don't know, you know. But it's also because, yeah, like, I mean, the movies they produced were, I think the best one they produced was probably the first season, which is one of the reasons why I don't go back and watch the first season, because all the work that they're doing is actually in service of a pretty good movie. There's this movie called Stolen Summer. It's like a coming-of-age movie set in Chicago in the 1960s. It's got Aidan Quinn and Kevin Pollak, and I remember one time I was working at Starbucks, and Kevin Pollak was, the comedian and actor recently on the Marvelous Miss Maisel show. Kevin Pollak was still doing stand-up comedy at the time, and he was at the Star Dome here in Birmingham, this comedy club, and he was staying in the Galleria in the hotel that was adjacent to the Galleria where I worked at Starbucks. And Kevin Pollak would come in every morning for like a week, and he would get a coffee from me, and I would talk to him. And one of the movies that I chose to tell him, I didn't talk to him about The Usual Suspects that he was in or any of that. I said, I loved you in Stolen Summer. And he's like, oh yeah, it's a pretty good movie, right? And so we had him sign the Starbucks apron that all the celebrities who came into that Starbucks signed. So he was up there with like the drummer from Poison, I think, and like Larry the Cable Guy. So, but you know, it's just but Stolen Summer did not make any money at all when it was finally released on DVD. It was released as a special feature in the Project Greenlight Season 1 DVD pack. So it was very sad way to release a movie, even though I think it's pretty good, you know. But yeah, anyway, I don't know what Season 5 was like. I did not watch Season 5. I think what Season 5 was, I think it just came out a couple of years ago. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were not a part of it because I think one of the reasons is they just didn't want to do it anymore, but also Matt Damon came under like a lot of fire in Season 4 and basically invented a whole new phrase in the lexicon called Damon-splaining, which is a takeoff on mansplaining. Because in Season 4, they had an African-American producer named Effie Brown who, had a very singular mission, which is very admirable. But, she really wanted to hire a director of color because the 3 previous directors that they had hired for Project Greenlight, had all been straight white men. And so she was really adamant that they hire a director of color. And Matt Damon, and I understand what he was saying, he just maybe didn't say it in the right way. He just said, like, you look for diversity in the casting of the show, not in the casting of the crew. And he was basically saying, like, behind the scenes, let's get the most qualified people, and then we can worry about diversity in who's in front of the camera. And so it was a very controversial moment and led to a lot of social media ire and outrage over Matt Damon. So, and from that point on in the series, Matt Damon is pretty, once again, non-existent, right? So, but yeah, Season 5, I think, and it is true that when you watch the early seasons of Project Greenlight, it is nothing but like a white sausage party. It's just white men talking to other white men, making decisions about, like, everybody else, and something that just it's indicative of how much culture has changed. It's just something we didn't notice and pay attention to back then, but something that in 2023, which is when the last season came on, I think we were very conscious of. So HBO, I think, overcorrected, and they went into the season saying, like, we don't know what movie we're going to do. We just know that it's going to be directed by a woman of color. So I think that may have turned a lot of people off because nobody who ever watched Project Greenlight, I think, watched it for those reasons. I think they just wanted to see. And, there's also the fact that, it probably backfired on HBO because nobody who ever worked on Project Greenlight who won the contest, whether they be the screenwriter or whether they be the director or directors, ever really went on to do anything of note since then. I think if you look on their IMDb's, Pete Jones, the writer-director who won the first season, probably did the most of his career than anybody else. He actually ended up working with the Farrelly brothers, who did like Dumb and Dumber, and I think he's actually written and directed a few movies of his own that have done pretty well. But the other winners, like Erica Beanie, who wrote The Battle of Shaker Heights, never wrote anything else of note. Kyle Rankin, one of the directors who won the second season, recently directed a movie, Run, Hide, and Fight, which has like a 0% score on Rotten Tomatoes, and was picked up by the Daily Wire, you know, that conservative website run by Ben Shapiro. You know, it's basically about a school shooting, but it's done like Die Hard, so super, super high taste, high brow, you know, I'm being sarcastic. And yeah, the one, John Gulager in the third season went on to direct, you know, the 2 Feast sequels, but never really anything of note after that. And yeah, so my point is that all of them in those 3 seasons did more to tank their emerging careers than anything else, because each season has, like, you know, 10 hours of them just making goof after goof after goof, picking fights for no reason, showing how inexperienced directors they are. And just, you know, that's why I said to my friend Jason a while back, who submitted a script to the 3rd season of Project Greenlight and didn't get chosen, I said to him, it's probably the best thing for you that you didn't get chosen, because you would have never done anything after that. So, you know. So yeah, season 5, my point is that I think, like, HBO, it probably backfired on whoever they chose, and I don't know who they chose. I don't know what movie they made. But it's like now they have a woman of color who's directing the movie who's tanking her career. So, you know, I just think, if anything, like, you know, we can go back and watch 4 seasons of Project Greenlight and see straight white male directors making asses out of themselves, I guess. I don't know. But, so, right. Anyway. Yeah, Project Greenlight, go back and watch it if you're interested in that kind of thing. I think it's a great reality show. It really is. Very bingeable. I stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning the other night watching it, right? So, yeah. Anyway, I think I'm going to call it there, finish the cigar. Thank you so much for joining me out here on the porch on a Friday night. I know it's not Friday night where you are. I know it's not whatever time it is. I can't see my watch. It's about 9:30, you know, at night. But our realities are synchronized. You're here with me. I'm there with you. We're sharing the same space, the same thoughts together. You can find me over at mikesbonfire.substack.com. That's where I publish everything that I do. You can also find me over at the Overnightscape Underground, onsug, ONSUG.com. And yeah. And if you like this show, please consider subscribing to my Substack if you haven't already. It really helps boost my spirits and knowing that people are listening to what I'm doing. And the best thing you can do in the world is comment on this show over at my Substack and just let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, any thoughts after this. I really love and appreciate comments so much. Anyway, this is a non-commercial show, and it always will be. I will never ask you to pay for it. Yeah, I think I can pretty much solidly say that at this point, right? This is the 267th episode of the Midnight Citizen Show, and it is a show that I've obviously done for many years because I love it, I enjoy it. It brings me happiness to finish a show and get it out there for you to hear. So, until next time, keep your eyes open.